and I'll let you know all the details. And I would love for you to join me and start your hair growth journey with Nutrafol. Right now, Nutrafol is offering my audience $10 off your first month subscription and free shipping when you click the link in my description and you enter the promo code Kimbyrleigha. I will leave it on the screen. I know it is hard to spell, but find out why over 4,500 healthcare professionals and stylists recommend Nutrafol for healthier hair by ordering today. And be sure to use my code to support this channel. Again, click the link in the description and use my code Kimbyrleigha. Thank you all for giving me your time for that. Now let me introduce you to Nikki. She was born in Thailand on November 9th of 1984, and she has 3 sisters, 2 of which have been very vocal and outspoken about this case. That's Chloe and Kay. You're going to be hearing about them more and more in this video, and I will be providing you with statements that they have made in their search for their sister. And there's also Nikki's sister, May. The family actually originated in Thailand, and Nikki went by her Mian name, which is Chang. But over time, her sisters explained that people began calling her by the nickname Nikki, and it stuck. That's when they moved to the US. Nikki's parents decided to immigrate to the US because back in Thailand, they were actually living in a refugee camp after the Vietnam War. And they moved to many different places trying to make a better life for themselves and eventually their children. And finally, they landed in Seattle, Washington, and eventually Redding, California, where this case takes place. And it is in Shasta County, and if that sounds familiar to you, because it did to me right away, that is because of the Sherry Papini case. If you don't know what this case is about, there are plenty of videos where you can deep dive it. Well, it happened there as well. And to give you a short synopsis of that case, she faked her disappearance back in 2016. And it was a huge case back then. And it's still mentioned recently because these cases that are hoax, they take up so much precious time and resources that could be used to help real victims. And I digress, but from what I've read and seen from Nikki's sisters, she seemed like the kind of person that everyone wanted to be around, full of life, fun, and always ready to make others laugh. She had a free spirit and a contagious sense of humor, the kind that could instantly lift your mood, and friends would describe her as goofy, bubbly, and brave. She was kind, she had a big heart, and she had nurturing instincts about her. She always wanted to make others feel taken care of, and she was very close to her family, including her extended family. She dreamed of having a big family of her own one day. Redding, California was a choice for her family because of the culture there. It's a very popular location for the Hmong community, and Nikki and her family are from Hmong descent, originating in Southeast Asia. So all of her cousins, aunts, uncles, they were all close by growing up when they all moved to the United States. Nikki was also petite, only 4'11", and about 90 to 100 pounds, and that is going to play into this. So that's why I'm mentioning, also because, of course, we want her description to be out there. We do not know what happened, so it's important to know exactly, and we'll go into more details about what she looked like when she disappeared. But from the info her sisters provided, which will come into play, she had this feisty side where she could be tough like a chihuahua, her sister Kay said, feisty, confident, and never afraid to stand up for herself. But she carried herself with a quiet strength, shaped by experiences that no one should ever have to endure, which we will get into. Nikki had a heart as big as her spirit. Her sister Chloe said that she was goofy and full of laughter and always giggling, and had this unique quality about her that really stood out to me, and it probably will for you too, given the comment she ended up making. I heard it on Kendall Rae's channel. She shared that Nikki's sisters told her that Nikki was fascinated by true crime, and what stood out the most was her deep empathy, even for those who had done the terrible things, the killers, which isn't easy for many of us to do. I know it's personally hard for me, but Nikki could see the pain in their eyes and the pain behind their actions. She always looked for the good in people, even when it wasn't easy to find. And that forgiving nature was part of her beauty, though at times it may have been her greatest vulnerability. She was at her core a genuinely loving person. She was someone whose compassion reached everyone around her. And I like to go to a person's personal Facebook, and that's what I did in this case. And it really showed me a part of who Nikki was and things about her. I kind of get to know people from what they post on their Facebook. And you could really tell that she had a lot of friends and family who adored her, and she was very close to. She was always smiling. She was beautiful inside and out from what I could tell, and I'll go into more of that once I tell you how she ended up married with kids and then eventually moving to Happy Valley. However, it was anything but happy. It didn't start that way. It usually doesn't, right? In the late 2000s, when Nikki was in her 20s, she started working as a cocktail waitress at the Wind River Resort and Casino, which was close to where she was living in Redding, California. That's where she ends up meeting her future husband, Tyler McCain. Tyler Scott McCain was born in March of 1985 and only about a year younger than Nikki. He's a local to Redding, and he and his family are members of the local Redding Rancheria tribe. Now, this is an important aspect of the case. So if you're not familiar, some indigenous tribes live on federally recognized reserves, and the Redding Rancheria is a reservation in Shasta County, and tribal reservations have a right to establish their own governments and their own laws that are separate from the state, and they're treated as a separate nation in many respects. They establish their own civil and criminal laws within the reservation and in regard to their members. The Redding Rancheria is special because it's actually home to 3 different tribes: the Wintu tribe, the Atramoe, I hope I'm saying that right, who are also known as the Pit River tribe, and the Yane tribes. It was established back in 1922 as a safe place for homeless Indians to camp and live according to what their website says verbatim. And the Redding Rancheria holds in its highest regard its tribal elders, especially the 17 tribal elders who they call their original distributees, 2 of which are Tyler McCain's descendants, Carol Hayward Timmons and Arthur Haywood. His great-grandfather, Tyler's grandfather, Orville Hayward, passed away January 31st of 2012, but grew up and was raised on the Redding Rancheria in Shasta County. He was of the Wintu Indian descent and a tribal elder. Orville was part of the original first tribal council, and he eventually helped to establish the Wind River Casino back in 1993. All of this is important. That's why I'm mentioning it. And that is the place, remember, where Nikki and Tyler met. Wind for the Wintu tribe, and River to signify the Atramoe connection. So the 2 tribes coming together and creating this casino. Tyler's mother, Jeanette Hayward, is one of Orville's 4 children and also a member of Redding Rancheria. Now, I find this part very interesting, and it's where I personally still am doing a lot of my research. One of my half-sisters is Native American. So that's one reason it interests me, but also because, as I said, this is a significant part of this case, and you will understand why, and that's why I'm going into this detail. Tyler's grandfather was employed as the facilities manager at Wind River Casino until he retired in 2002. And Tyler's mother, Jeanette, also worked there, and it was kind of like a family business, so to speak, and a big one. Tyler's family has a lot of power, being members of the Redding Rancheria, especially if you're part of the government. And at least 5 of Tyler's family members are part of the 7-member tribal administration. And with any government, these individuals are responsible for enforcing laws, managing resources within the jurisdiction, law enforcement, so there is a lot of power there. But when Nikki first met Tyler, he wasn't really her type. Looks-wise, they were opposites, Tyler with his light skin and his blue eyes, and Nikki with her olive skin and dark eyes. But they say that opposites attract. And Tyler was definitely interested in getting to know Nikki. Tyler worked in the slot section of the casino, and he was definitely known to be a flirt. It's not something he tried to hide, or maybe he wasn't able to hide it very well. And he didn't just flirt with Nikki. It seemed like he was quite the ladies' man and wasn't used to being told no or being turned down. Now, at the time, Nikki's sister Kay also worked at the casino with her, and she was well aware of Tyler. I'm sure many people were because of his connections to the reservation and also to the casino itself. But Kay had her doubts about Tyler, and she wasn't really sure if he was a match for her kind-hearted, free-spirited sister. At this point, Tyler had already been in trouble with the law, a felony burglary charge on his record. Remember who Nikki was. She had compassion for others even when they weren't doing their best. She saw the best in Tyler, who seemed to be very invested in making her his girl, and she gave him a chance and never looked back. But we can't really say the same about Tyler, but we'll get there. I already told you that Nikki wanted a family, so as soon as she started dating Tyler, she was already thinking about her future. And soon she was pregnant before they got a chance to get married. And in Nikki's culture, weddings are a huge deal. I mean, they are in many cultures, But it is a 3-day event and involved intense planning. Nikki really had her mind on more children because it wasn't easy for her to get pregnant the first time. And as a matter of fact, she and Tyler struggled with fertility. But eventually they went on to have 4 children, 3 girls almost back to back. But maybe she was waiting for her boy. And she finally got him in January of 2017. And he completed the McCain family. And they looked like a very happy, loving family, smiling in photo shoots on the beach, smiling for holiday photo shoots, and even in their everyday photos on Instagram and Facebook, where Nikki, like most of us, shared pieces of her life as a stay-at-home mom. She was great at it too. You can tell that she loved being a mother. It's like she was made for it. But I analyze things with a very careful eye, and I scrutinize details, especially in hindsight. And Tyler doesn't look that happy in the pictures. And you know what they say? A photo can say 1,000 words, but 2 come to my mind. Checked out. His gaze was often really vacant. While everyone else was genuinely smiling happily, Tyler just looked like a deer caught in the headlights. And if he did smile, it appeared forced. But of course, hindsight is 20/20. And I'm seeing these photos after everything I'm about to tell you. Tyler and Nikki had a rocky relationship. They weren't even officially married for years, and it took about 6 years of engagement for Tyler to finally commit officially. I mean, they were already living together like a married couple with children and all. But when it came time for the wedding, I don't know if it was what Nikki always dreamed of. Because instead of a grand affair, it was very low key. And why I'm mentioning this is because from what I read and what her sisters said, Nikki wasn't really the type that, did anything low-key. She went all out for every single holiday, making sure it was super special for her children. But what seemed to matter more at that point were the kids. They came first. So the wedding didn't matter as much. And sometimes I think there were subtle signs looking back because everything started to fall apart. Nikki had her suspicions that Tyler's player ways had never really stopped. His flirtatious personality, the attention-seeking that he always had, being a ladies' man, meant that Nikki lacked trust in him, and soon there were suspicions that Tyler wasn't being faithful. And Nikki being the type of person she was, to always see the best in others, it took a lot for her to confront Tyler and accuse him of infidelity. But she finally did. And sadly, after a lot of pressuring and calling him out on things, he did finally admit he had been cheating. And honestly, that is the type of betrayal that not many people can come back from. If you have experienced it, and I have, it can be absolutely devastating, especially in a marriage. That's almost a deal breaker. I mean, it is a deal breaker for a lot of people, but Nikki was the forgiving type, maybe to a fault. Because after everything I know, I can say with confidence that she deserved better. She was way too good for this man. Just because Nikki didn't leave Tyler doesn't mean this wasn't a major issue in their relationship. It was a huge deal. It led to constant fights and even more of a lack of trust. But Nikki was determined to make things work, especially for their children. All the while from the outside, things between Tyler and Nikki looked normal, happy, and loving. If you looked at the curated feed and the well-put-together photo shoots, it can be very deceiving. Even Nikki's own sisters didn't know the extent to what was going on behind closed doors. They knew Nikki was struggling at times to get over the pain that she felt, but they never could have guessed what was really happening. But it all came to a head when the pandemic hit. So much changed for so many of us. And at that time, Nikki had been a stay-at-home mom while Tyler worked as a spa manager, which meant that they would have time away from one another during the day. But since many businesses had to close for COVID, Tyler was laid off. And now he and Nikki were in lockdown together in the same close quarters, day in and day out. The pandemic broke up a lot of marriages, and it seemed to bring out the worst in a lot of people, especially in Tyler. It put the relationship to the test. Being around someone 24/7 can be hard, especially when you're forced to be. And you can't release any stress because everything is closed down. You can't be with your friends. You can't get your escape like you usually do. I know my relationship at the time was put to the test and we didn't last. And I'm sure many of you have similar stories. I could truly relate to this, being under the same roof as someone you're already on thin ice with. And I can already guess some of the comments that I'm going to get from some of you because I'm already thinking them. What did Nikki see in this man? Honestly, what? I told you they lived in Happy Valley. Specifically, at a home at 17277 Olinda Road in a 3-bedroom, 3-bath home on 3.5 acres of land. Keep that in mind. That's a decent amount of land. Tyler worked on cars. He kept lots of them on the property, and most of them were not in working condition. To me, it reminded me of men, it can be women too, who won't get rid of something because they think, oh, I'll need this little piece of something one day, and I don't want to buy it later. But in turn, they hoard a bunch of useless items. Well, these were basically junk cars, but working on them was one of Tyler's passions. So they did have an attached 3-car garage as well as a designated area on the land where Tyler would go to play mechanic. I know this can be a stress reliever for some people, an outlet to blow off some steam, and Tyler seemed to be the type to fly off the handle. But there was more. During this time, during the pandemic, he started to act strange. His personality changed dramatically, which explained the glazed over eyes that I saw in some of those photos. And then I read what was going on. It started with his sister needing a place to stay. She was trying to get back on her feet and she'd been struggling with addiction, and Tyler opened up his garage or their garage for her to stay for the time being. That's not uncommon for a brother to be there for his sister. But over time, Nikki noticed that Tyler would disappear for hours at a time. And at first she thought maybe he was working on the cars or it was at his mom's house. But then she realized he was in the garage with his sister. Tyler was using meth. Now, that would be the ultimate game changer, deal breaker for a lot of people. Cheating and now substances, that's a lot. And now the arguments were not only about infidelity, they were about him becoming an addict and the way he was acting towards Nikki. Nothing good can come out of a situation like this, and Nikki was at her breaking point. She was finally, sadly, coming to terms with the fact that not only was Tyler not going to change, he didn't want to. He was only getting worse at this point. And I don't have details on whether Tyler was ever able to get help. But what we do know is that things got way worse for Nikki. And think about this. If the fights were bad before, and they were, unbeknownst to her family, they were already becoming physical. But think about after something like meth is introduced to a situation like this. Now, if you aren't aware, because to be honest, I wasn't until a while back, I did another case that involved it. There were a lot of side effects, some that the user chases and others they wish didn't exist, I'm sure. But it can make people feel energized at first. They'll suddenly feel awake and focused and want to get up and do things. It's even medically used under the supervision of a physician to help treat ADHD. Who wouldn't want more energy? I get it. And as a new mom, I'm practically falling asleep right now, but it's a sense of bliss that gets users hooked. I read this online at drugfree.org. Quote, it dramatically elevates dopamine, a chemical messenger associated with the brain's pleasure and reward system. If normal dopamine functioning is around 100 units, meth spikes it to 1,250 units, well above the pleasure derived from food, sex, alcohol, and cocaine, end quote. And it lasts anywhere from 8 to 12 hours from one hit. So I guess some may think that it would save them money if like they were used to doing something else as their choice of substance. But that's the problem. Once you get into it, there's a sick cycle that occurs, and users never want to come down because let's face it, that doesn't feel good. So they end up using for weeks and weeks, and then finally their body just crashes. And when that happens, a person can experience intense mood swings. They also can become super paranoid and believe people are after them, even their own family and friends. They often feel hypersensitive, irritable, and impulsive. That is not a good combination for a man that Nikki is already in a toxic relationship with. That is definitely not something that's easy to fix. And something a lot of people don't know is that meth really messes with intimacy. It no longer can feel the same if you're not high. And to make it worse, when you're on it, you have an increased desire. So if Tyler was already cheating before, I have no doubt that things probably escalated in that area as well. And this can be devastating for a couple that's already trying to work things out and feel distant from one another. Nikki knew she needed to make a big decision and leave, but it's not easy. Not for someone like her that sees the best in others, and not for anyone. You still love the old version of the person you're with, and you hope that old version will reappear. And a lot of times they will make promises that they will. Tyler made promise after promise to Nikki, but he kept breaking them. And then things got increasingly physical to the point where Nikki was scared for her life. And when they argued, she would grab the kids and lock herself in a bathroom so Tyler couldn't get to them. Her sole focus became the children and their safety, and she knew she needed an escape plan. Tyler had created a hell that she was now living in, and this was supposed to be a very promising life. One of the other issues was that no one knew this was going on. Nikki was in quarantine like most of us were. She wasn't visiting her sisters and her family like she did before, so the bruising and the wounds, they were hidden. But finally, as the restrictions were lifted, Nikki made her way back over to see Kay and Chloe, and they were shocked. You could tell right away that she had been harmed, and that's when they insisted that she go to the police. She needed to report Tyler for what he had done, but Nikki was also heartbroken. Of course she knew that what he did was wrong, but there was a part of her that didn't want to get him in trouble, and that's tough. And it's sometimes hard for people to understand, and they'll judge these situations that they haven't been in before. And I didn't want to forget to mention this. They did try marriage counseling here and there, but it never seemed to change anything. And honestly, with meth being in the picture now, I don't think counseling alone would have helped. But it's not as though Nikki hadn't tried either. She had called 911 on several different occasions. The police came out to the house, and they would be there to make a report that Tyler was hurting her. But it's like, in the moment, it seemed like she was confident that she wanted him to go to jail and get in trouble and be arrested. But when law enforcement got there, Nikki and Tyler would be calm at that point, and things had settled down, and she didn't want to file any charges against him. However, because of what was going on in that house between the meth, the physical harm, and the allegations, word got to those in power in the tribal court. And in 2021, the decision was made to take Nikki's 4 children away and place them in Tyler's family's custody. Now that hurt my heart. Why? Why not remove the real issue here? Because we know it's Tyler. Why not take Tyler away instead of taking these children away from their mother and then placing them with his family? Well, remember when I was explaining a part of how Tyler's family was in power, part of the tribal court? That could have been one of the reasons. I explained that his family's connection to the reservation and the power they held, his aunt being on the tribal council, she was one of the people who made that final decision in cases like this. Even Tyler's mom began making decisions of her own in this situation and prohibiting Nikki from seeing her own children. I can only imagine how sad that would have been for Nikki. There were times that Jeanette, that's Tyler's mom, would become what I think I read hysterical, that was the word that was used, when Nikki merely wanted to see them. And it got to the point where Jeanette called the police and actually pressed charges against Nikki. This incident stemmed from a time where Nikki and Jeanette got into it. She wanted to take the kids, and it got heated. And Jeanette called the cops, and she did not hesitate to make sure there was a record against Nikki. And that's crushing because Nikki had spared Jeanette's own son, Tyler. Time and time again, she didn't press charges. But now here's Tyler's mom, and she's making Nikki out to be the aggressor and the one responsible in this mess. And eventually, Nikki's sister and her family were granted shared custody of the children, but it didn't come without them fighting to be a part of the kids' lives. But Nikki was still living with Tyler at this point, just without the kids, and I couldn't help but think, without witnesses. I understand they were all very young, but they still know and can corroborate things. But now Nikki was even more isolated. But she would still leave from time to time, especially when things were not going well with Tyler. And this happened more and more, and she would go to her mom's or her sister's houses. Nikki and Tyler would get into fights. She would leave for a few days, but then Tyler always knew where she would be. And he would text or call her sisters, begging them to please tell Nikki to just come home and that he's so sorry. And I was kind of surprised when her sisters explained in an interview that Tyler was pretty convincing. In these moments, he was calm, cool, and collected. He wasn't in a violent rage. He wasn't acting erratic. So it was believable when he promised this would be the last time and he would change. This is classic signs of DARVO, which is an acronym for the reaction from people like Tyler, especially in instances of DV. DARVO stands for Deny, Attack, Reverse Victim and Offender, and I think it is self-explanatory, but there were signs. Let's flash forward to Friday, December 1st of 2023. Nikki was sitting in a hospital bed at Mercy Hospital being interviewed by an officer from the sheriff's department, and she was lucky to be alive. I have this entire document. I know some of you, like me, I like people to read these things because I don't have time to sit there and read every word. And let's face it, I'm sure a lot of you don't have time either. That's why I'm here. If you want to skip this part, I made chapter markers for that reason, so you can go where you want in the story. And I will also do a short recap afterward, so you can skip ahead or you can hear the entire report. But I'm going to read it to you. The report time was at 7:10 p.m. on December 1st of 2023. And this is written by Officer Jerry M. Mall, and it states, on Friday, 12/1/2023, at 23:12 hours, so that would be 11:12 p.m., I responded to Mercy Hospital in Redding, California, to make contact with a female who shall be referred in this report as confidential victim. Side note, that person is actually Nikki McCain, so just be aware of that. The purpose of the contact was for a reported domestic violence incident involving herself and her husband of 13 years, Tyler McCain. This occurred on 11/23/2023 between the hours of 20:30 and 23:30, so 8:30 and 11:30 p.m. at their listed address on Olinda Road in Anderson, California. It should be noted that the original call of the report came in at or around 7:10 p.m. on the date of December 1st of 2023. Upon coming on duty later that evening, I attempted phone contact with confidential victim, but was told by her friend she was currently being treated in the ER and not able to speak to me. In making contact with confidential victim at the hospital, I immediately noticed facial trauma to both of her eyes, as well as her forehead and facial areas. Both of her eyes were blackened severely. Both were also swollen in what appeared to be the result of a physical assault. I asked confidential victim who did this to her. She stated it was her husband, Tyler McCain. Using my department-issued iPhone, I recorded a conversation and asked confidential victim to explain to me what occurred. She relayed the following in summary. Confidential victim stated, on Wednesday, 11/29/2023, she returned home to her address on Olinda Road, a residence she shared with her husband, Tyler McCain. She said they had been together and married for approximately 16 years and have 4 children in common, none of whom live with them currently. Getting back to the night of the incident, confidential victim stated when she got home at around 20:15 to 20:30, which is 8:15 to 8:30 p.m., Tyler was not home. Confidential victim went into her bedroom and started combing her hair. When approximately 15 minutes later, Tyler returned home in a strange mood and for some reason went and locked the back door of the house. Confidential victim stated that for unknown reasons, Tyler seemed extremely agitated and was not making any sense. When he contacted her in the bedroom area, she said he immediately jumped on her, held her down on the ground and dragged her around, yelled at her and asked her, "What's going on? What are you doing?" Confidential victim stated Tyler had a glazed, scary look in his eyes, as if he was having some sort of mental episode. Confidential victim tried to calm Tyler down, but to no avail, and he continued to torment her verbally, as well as hold her down, and began to repeatedly hit her in the face. Confidential victim stated that Tyler's behavior began to grow more and more intense towards her, hitting her in the facial area with his open hands in a harsh, forceful manner. She said in addition to hitting her face, her eyes, and her cheek areas, he also pulled her hair numerous times and even poured large amounts of water onto her from a water jug that was sitting beside her, causing her to become very cold. Confidential victim stated this behavior by Tyler continued for approximately 3 hours, during which time he bound her ankles and wrists together with white tape. He also placed a piece of tape over her mouth so she could not speak properly. Confidential victim stated part of the tape was not covering her mouth fully, so she was able to breathe, though she could not speak. During this time, confidential victim stated Tyler turned her over onto her stomach and straddled her from behind, pulled on her hair, and forcefully pulled her head back, saying he was going to kill her. I asked confidential victim what state of mind she was in at that moment. Confidential victim said she thought she was going to die, that Tyler may actually intend to kill her. Throughout the evening, Tyler periodically hit her as she laid on the ground. Confidential victim said one time Tyler attempted to wrap something around her neck, but was not successful in doing that. I asked confidential victim what type of object Tyler used to wrap around her neck. She said she was not sure. She didn't see it, only that she felt it. In looking at confidential victim's neck, I did not notice any specific strangle or choke marks that could be attributed to an attempted strangling. In looking at the eyes of the confidential victim, it was clearly evident she had been struck numerous times, with her injuries suggesting they came at the hands of being struck by another human being. It should also be noted, confidential victim is a small person at 4'11" and 90 pounds in stature. Tyler is substantially larger and stronger than she is, and there would be no way for her to fend him off in a fit of rage during the assault. Confidential victim said that Tyler has done this type of thing before, but never this bad. During my interview with her, confidential victim said she was not sure about Tyler's illegal drug use, but believed he used methamphetamine periodically. I asked confidential victim after the approximately 3-hour ordeal how it ended. She stated, towards the end of the night, around 11:30 or so, Tyler went into the kitchen area where he remained for several minutes. Believing this was the opportunity for her to escape, confidential victim grabbed her robe that contained her car keys, ran outside, and got into her vehicle. She said as she was leaving, Tyler came running out after her and jumped on the hood of her car, telling her to stop, which she ignored. I asked confidential victim if Tyler sexually assaulted her during the incident in any way, and she said he did not. After leaving her residence, confidential victim went to her sister's house in Reading, where she has been staying ever since, and eventually made the report to law enforcement. I asked confidential victim to describe the punches Tyler hit her with. She said it was not really a fist, more of an open hand, and that he hit her 10 to 15 times in her facial area, including her eyes and forehead. Confidential victim could not see what he used to wrap her neck, but believed he may have been trying to suffocate her. Confidential victim said she has not spoken to Tyler since, and he has not called her. No one else was at the residence when this incident occurred, and there were no witnesses to contact. Photos of the injuries to confidential victim, as well as the medical release form, were signed and will be added to this report. The photos will be booked into evidence after they are transferred to a CD-ROM. My recorded interview with confidential victim will also be converted to CD-ROM and later booked into evidence. At this time, confidential victim will no longer be living at the Olinda Road address and will be staying for the foreseeable future with her sister in Reading. Confidential victim was advised to go to one safe place in Reading at her earliest convenience to get assistance in obtaining a restraining order against Tyler. She was also provided a Marcy's card. By the way, this is a card that is given to victims that explains California Victims' Bill of Rights Act of 2008, and this is a constitutional amendment that provides victims of crime with the rights to justice and due process, including the right to be treated with fairness and respect and protection from the defendant and notification of court proceedings. But back to the report. She was also provided with a victim of violent crimes pamphlet, a report number, and my contact information in case she had any questions or concerns. After speaking to confidential victim, myself and assisting deputies responded to Olinda Road to contact Tyler McCain. Upon responding to that location, Tyler subsequently came out of the residence and met us in the driveway. Tyler was taken into custody without incident, placed in handcuffs that were double locked and checked for proper fit. He was then placed in the back of a sheriff's office patrol vehicle and transported to jail without incident. Prior to being transported, I informed Tyler he was being placed under arrest for domestic violence, as well as other charges for the injuries sustained by confidential victim during a domestic violence incident. At the jail, I read Tyler his Miranda rights from my card issued to me by the Shasta County District Attorney's Office. Tyler verbally stated to me he understood his rights and agreed to speak to me regarding this incident. I first confirmed confidential victim was in fact Tyler's wife. He stated she was, and that they had been together for 13 years now. I asked Tyler if he was aware of the injuries his wife, confidential victim, had upon her face and body areas. Tyler said he was aware of them, but that he did not actually see them. He said the last time he saw his wife was on the 29th, during evening hours around 8 p.m. When I asked if there was any kind of disturbance between them, he said no, there was not. Tyler then told me that he believed his wife had gotten into a fight with another female. Now, I want to stop here for context. Tyler is alleging that Nikki was in a lesbian affair with another woman and that she got into an altercation with her side girlfriend. Okay, Tyler. Anyway, back to the document. He said That's how she received the injuries that she currently has upon her body. I asked Tyler if he saw the fight take place, and he said he did not. Tyler's statement sounded inconsistent, saying that he believed the confidential victim was having an affair with another female, but then went on to say that they got along great and have been together as a happy couple, never having any type of physical altercations between them. When I again asked Tyler if he saw the fight between confidential victim and this alleged female, or if he saw the injuries that she had upon her face, he said he did not. I informed Tyler his wife, confidential victim, reported him as being the person who caused her numerous and visible injuries to her face during a violent encounter at their shared residence on Olinda Road on 11/29/23. Tyler said he did not strike confidential victim in any way and did not know how she received the injuries that she was treated for at the hospital. Based on the totality of their circumstances and based on the fact that the injuries upon confidential victim were consistent with that of a domestic violence incident, I informed Tyler he was being charged with 273.5 PC, felony domestic violence, as well as false imprisonment PC 236, a felony, and PC 422A, terrorist threats, also a felony. The domestic violence-related charges stem from the fact I observed physical injuries upon confidential victim she sustained at the hands of Tyler McCain, her husband. The false imprisonment is due to the fact confidential victim stated Tyler bound both of her hands and legs with tape, preventing her from leaving the house. The PC 422A terrorist threats are for the fact Tyler threatened to kill confidential victim numerous times during the course of the incident and was in great fear for her own safety and well-being. This concluded my contact with Tyler, and he was booked on the listed charges. Prior to transporting Tyler to jail, I was given permission by both confidential victim earlier at the hospital and by suspect Tyler McCain to enter residence and retrieve confidential victim's cell phones. During the cursory safety search of the residence, 5 firearms were found inside the bedroom area in plain view where both Tyler and confidential victim reside. Tyler is not a convicted felon and is not prohibited from owning firearms, but a records check revealed that one of the firearms, an AK-47 style rifle, was reported to be stolen out of Oregon. That rifle, as well as the other ones, were taken for safekeeping and later entered into evidence as recovered stolen property and for safekeeping. Sergeant Casas collected the firearms along with ammunition and booked them into Shasta County ID Lab. Tyler McCain was later served with a receipt of the property at the jail that he signed in my presence that will be downloaded and added to this report. I also looked for the type of white tape that confidential victim reported as being tied up by Tyler with, lying on the floor in the bedroom area, but did not observe any in plain view. This report will be forwarded to the district attorney's office with the listed charges that, based on the totality of their circumstances in this incident, show that Tyler McCain was the primary aggressor in this matter. The case status was closed and forwarded to district attorney's office for review. Okay, that's the end of the report, and I know that was a lot. But I know some of you wanted to skip it, and I understand that. So to recap, Nikki finally sought treatment for the harm caused by Tyler one night on November 29th of 2023. It was around 8:15 to 8:30 that night. He came home in an erratic mood and began attacking her. He ended up binding her hands and legs at one point and even got on her back and tried to tie something around her neck while she was lying on her stomach, and he was straddling her so she could not get up at all. And he continued striking her in the face over and over again, and she thought she was going to die. But she managed to escape when he went to the kitchen for a few minutes, and she made a run for it and grabbed a robe that she knew had her car keys inside. She then fled to her mother's house, and eventually, in the days that followed, her sisters came over to visit, saw the state that she was in, and they were shocked and told her that, she had 2 black eyes. Her sister said it was so bad, she was unrecognizable. And it was at that point they were very worried for her safety and well-being in that moment, and I get it. That's where they could actually see what was going on, and there were things that they might not have been able to see. They could have thought she had internal injuries for all they knew. So they begged her to go to the hospital to get treatment, and Nikki finally exposed the truth. Tyler had been harming her for years, and this was just the latest episode. I personally feel like with the facts from that report, it was attempted murder. From the bindings to him attempting to put something around her neck, sitting on her, this will matter later on for sure. But I'm just giving you my opinion from reading all this. If someone is unrecognizable, to the point of it being so severe. If she hadn't fled, who knows what would have happened to her? Well, we do. We know. She would have died. She would have been dead. Her sisters realized even after days passed, Nikki's face was still so swollen and black. They thought that she was almost beaten to death, in their words. They saw some light at the end of the tunnel, though, because Nikki had finally been brave enough to report Tyler, and he was finally arrested and taken into custody. But of course, he told a much different story. That Nikki was the one cheating with a woman, and they, the woman and her, are the ones that had an altercation, not him. And that is so far-fetched. Could it be true? Sure. But I think Occam's razor applies here. That is the simplest explanation is usually the truth. Not always, but usually. And those who knew Nikki knew that Tyler was the problem. At this point, Nikki's next step was that she was to report to a facility called One Safe Place, where she could get assisted in obtaining a restraining order against Tyler. Now, I've heard really good things about this nonprofit. They truly help in having a crisis hotline, a crisis intervention in person that you can be a part of, restraining order assistance, and even emergency shelter and housing for victims. Nikki was safe for a while, but this cycle is hard to break. They'd known each other for nearly half their lives at this point. I mean, 16 years, that's a really long time. And Tyler had a way of creeping back into her life. And I wish the next part wasn't true, but Tyler now had a court date for the exact charges that Nikki filed against him. Now, I'm assuming she did not have a restraining order yet or hadn't filed it, or I don't know if she ever did. And some may wonder why. Well, I hate to say this, but a lot of times they don't work anyway. And sometimes they instigate even more violence. But I can't tell you those details because I could not find them. However, what I can tell you is that the court date was approaching, and somehow Tyler, the guy with many cars in his possession, albeit junk cars, can't drive. But he can't drive them because he had a suspended license, not that he didn't have a vehicle to use. His license was suspended, I believe, because of the gun charges, but in any case, he called Nikki, of all people, and I wonder why. Well, not just because he probably knew how to manipulate her into getting what he wanted, but it was what he really wanted. You just wait. He asked her, "Can you please give me a ride to court because, you're the one who got me into this mess, sir? Have you looked in the mirror? It's you. You got yourself here." We know how kind Nikki is, and time had passed. They'd been away from each other. Things had cooled down. Who knows what Tyler promised this time, but Nikki agreed to drive him. However, Tyler had other plans that included not the courthouse, but his own personal defense attorney's office, because that's where Nikki found herself that day. He had her drive right into the parking lot of his own attorney's office, where she was then persuaded to drop all the charges against Tyler. What an asshole. That is so controlling. This is the type of guy he was. But Nikki stood up for herself. She actually refused, and Tyler wasn't having it. He ran, he got into her car, and he took off, leaving Nikki behind. I don't know how this was resolved. That information was sparse. But what I do know is the pressure was on Tyler. He would make all kinds of promises to Nikki if she would just drop the charges. And I wondered, what kind of fines or jail time would he be facing? Because he seemed very hell-bent on not being charged, not going to court. So I was curious and I looked up the statutes related to the crimes in California. So far, for just 273.5 PC, felony DV, that conviction can result in 2 to 6 years in state prison. These offenses are also what's considered 3-strike offenses. So if you have one, it